Welcome to July's guest session. We're welcomed and graced by Dave Westgarth as our guest for this one. Our first non-military individual who has come to speak to us. So really appreciate you spending your time to share your knowledge with not just the group that we've got on today, but also everyone else that's going to potentially listen in the future, who will no doubt want to know more about delivery as it's becoming more prominent. Rather than going down that project management route, there's more interest around the sort of delivery management and teams aspects. So really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And before we start, as always, we need to shout out Wayne Smallman. He's always here supporting the Agile group. He's the founder of Mill Scrum. Again, he's leading that journey of trying to educate military individuals that are still serving in understanding Agile principles and delivering more effectively. So thanks Wayne, for your help. Again, John, like I mentioned before the recording, take the opportunity to ask all these questions. You are in that role that Dave will be able to support and answer those questions. So get those thinking caps on. Why do we do these guest sessions? It's literally education, guidance, and support. That's what we're trying to do with the Agile group. We are a community of ex-military individuals that all want to do better in our professional careers, whether that's project, delivery, Agile, Scrum, Ops, whatever it may be. The Agile practices and principles will enable you to do a much better job and lead teams more effectively. So this is what it's all about. It's education, guidance, and support. Enough from me with the intros of what we're here to do, what we're trying to do, and what we're trying to achieve. Over to you, Dave. Can you give us 5 minutes, just a quick intro of who you are, what you've done, and where you've been?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much for the intro, Jake. Very kind. As you saw, my name's Dave. I've been in the industry for about, I think it's a long time now, getting on for 10 years. So starting to make us feel old now. But yeah, came in at entry level as a developer/analyst role, which was great for me to break into the industry. Beforehand, I'd done all sorts of terrible jobs, call centers, furniture delivery. And to be honest with you, I fell into a bit of a trap. I fell into a trap a lot of people in my generation fell into that you guys probably didn't. I went to uni and just did whatever was on the agenda, and then got out the other end and realised there's no jobs. I did a psychology degree, which, looking back, huge own goal. Should never have done that, but hindsight's 2020. So as I say, I had some sort of what I call normal jobs for a long time while I was saving up to go back and retrain. I went back to university and studied computing and IT, which was great. And then, that was really the jetpack on for my career from there, and it's gone from strength to strength to strength. I started out in a development role, which was great, and sort of like a lot of people do in delivery and project management, stumbled my way into my first opportunity there. I was working for a very small-scale consultancy in Sunderland called Sagez at the time, and it was a great little opportunity for me. There were a couple of senior people there, but the vast majority were very young, entry-level folks coming into the IT industry. So just by virtue of having some transferable experience, I was quite quickly able to cycle up and move into more of the front and center roles of delivery management, project management, that type of thing. So that was great. And then from there, I went to public sector, DWP. That was a really good step forward. Great to do a little bit of public service, and I always say it feels like a little bit of a civic duty working with civil service, HMRC, MOD. It feels really good. The projects really matter, and you really feel like you're making a difference. And that was tremendous timing, because I think 3 to 4 months after that, the pandemic hit, and that was a major change, but I couldn't have been in a better place at the time. Public sector, my job was completely secure, and I really managed to knuckle down and get through a lot more, especially on the L&D front and the development front, than I probably would have if life had just continued as normal. So that was great. I'm sure we'll get into L&D, but that was sort of the starting point for me. After DWP, I went to a fashion organisation, actually, a product-focused fashion organisation. They'd done really well in the lockdown. In lockdown, a lot of fashion retailers realised how poor their websites were, and there was a really pressing need now to make them better. And the company I worked for did a lot of AI-powered and machine learning-powered tooling and widgets for websites that was really good. So I went and worked there for a while, and that was really good to get fashion on your CV. Not quite what you were expecting in this industry, but it was a nice one. And now I've gone back into consultancy. I'm working at BGSS, which is an international consultancy. We get involved in lots of cool stuff. And I've just continued on the AI and machine learning path. Generally, my first few projects have all been in that AI arena, which is great. And that's sort of the beauty of being in consultancy. You're going to be going into projects that matter, projects where you've got a real opportunity to prove yourself. And typically, people bring in consultancies because you've got skills and knowledge that they don't have in-house, and you're always going to be pushing the boundaries in terms of being at the cutting edge of what's possible. So lots of cloud stuff, lots of agile transformation stuff, and lots of AI stuff, which is just a match made in heaven for me. I hope that was okay. I know I've taught you to death already, but
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Again, if you cover too much, then all of our questions kind of go. So,
yeah.
no, that's ideal. So you started off as an analyst. So how did that then lead into where you are now in the sort of agile delivery management space? It seems like a natural trajectory, but how did that happen for you?
Yeah, it was quite a natural progression. So I joined a team at a small consultancy, and we were in a team working for a big British insurance firm that was doing an overhaul of pre-existing solutions and tools that they already had. There were a couple of senior guys in the team, and I just joined as my first tech job. I just didn't quite know what I was getting into, to be perfectly honest. And at that point, I thought I'll become a developer because that's where the jobs are. If I develop the skills, I've got a career for life, and then I'll be set. But what happened was over the first 6 months or so, I was getting stuck in trying loads of different things: development, test, delivery, business analysis, just a typical sort of analyst role in a consultancy. They'll throw you at whatever will stick. But a fairly senior person in the team left within that 6 months, and it left a bit of a void in our team. As I touched on, the consultancy had a lot of young entry-level people, and just by virtue of being that little bit older and having some work experience, I was sort of the lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at a candidate who stepped into that project management front and center delivery role. And that's when I really started to learn a hell of a lot. And the nice thing about it was, because I had sort of the technical experience and the technical skills, the stakeholders who I was dealing with were a lot more forgiving of me than they would have been if I didn't have that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't at that point have the wider project delivery or business management or technical acumen. Having that sort of foundational knowledge of what the work is that we were doing and how that feeds into the wider strategic goals was really helpful, which is why I'm a big advocate for Scrum and delivery professionals having some form of technical knowledge. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to know how to program, because I haven't programmed anything in enterprise or professionally for a long time now, but having some kind of knowledge of system design, database design, UX, UI, anything that you can do to sort of anchor your skills in a sort of, for want of a better word, a digital trade, that'll all pay off. And as your career goes, you'll pick up more and more as you go. I always compare it to working on sites. When you're on the tools, you might go in as a joiner, but you're going to do other things just by virtue of being there to muck in and get the job done. So there was a wave in the industry previously where, and I can't quite believe this, but the opinion was technical skills are a detriment, and I just couldn't. I've never been quite able to wrap my head around that. What that argument boils down to for me is ignorance is better than knowledge, and I just can't see any situation where that is the case. But yeah, that was sort of the trajectory for me. A gap appeared. I was the only one who was vaguely available to step in. Incredible challenge at the time, thinking I've only got 6 months experience in this industry. I'm working with guys at a heavy hitting tech firm, all these London-based contractors who really know their stuff and they're running rings around us. But in some ways, this is advice I give to people, especially coming in. That's what really makes you improve. If you're having an easy ride, you're probably not improving very much. You're probably going to coast. If you're in the fire, you really know that you're developing.
Absolutely.
So a good bit of trauma is good for you, I suppose. But you guys know that better than me, of course.
You've got to show that resilience, haven't you? And just take a few hits and then just come back stronger.
100%, yeah.
So do you think, so now you're more in that sort of agile delivery management part and leading teams, cross-functional teams, do you look back to any of that psychology stuff and actually think it's a benefit now? Or do you still kind of just think that was a piece in your time, a bit in your past where you just, you leave it in the past? Or do you actually refer back to that now?
So I always resist the urge to advertise it, because I think psychology is very pop culture-ish, and there's a lot of sort of OK magazine stuff that people try to sell as psychological research, and it's just not the same thing. But I do agree, there's a lot of supplementary skills and supplementary knowledge that's incredibly helpful for things like motivation, personality management, collaboration, communication. There's a lot of good stuff in there. The problem with psychology is, as I say, there's so much of that pop culture stuff, and especially with the advent of sort of social media and TikTok, people giving out sort of clinical advice on TikTok, and yet that is not where you should go for psychological support. You should speak to trained professionals. But yeah, it's incredibly helpful. Yeah, incredibly helpful.
I think I've seen that a lot in your content recently. Is if you're wanting a coach, then get a coach. You know,
Yeah,
someone who's done a Scrum Master certification and gone in as an Agile coach is not a qualified coach in any way, shape, or form, unless they've gone through a coaching framework. But it's they're two very different professions, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. There's a chap called Stephen Feeney who I think is ex-military as well,
Yeah.
and he'd put a post on about it, and I thought he's spot on because that's in the and this is going to go a bit off the track here, but this is one of my favorite soapboxes to get on. The problem with these armchair psychologists is they don't know what they're getting themselves into. Like psychologists go through a lot of training to sterilize themselves and their sort of mental models and mindsets before they enter these sort of conversations. These guys are going in ham-fisted at these conversations, and they'll get to a point where they don't really understand what's theirs and what's the person's they're talking to anymore in terms of ideas, concepts, and outlooks. And that's very dangerous because you could quite easily find yourself, instead of being a stabilizing influence on somebody else, they're unbalancing you as well now because you're not trained to deal with this. I think it's incredibly dangerous, and I'm glad to see the opinions change. That Scrum Masters are not psychological professionals; they're not psychologists, and
Mm,
it's a fundamental disrespect to that industry to assume that it's just something you can jump into because you've done a PSM1.
absolutely. Wayne, you got your hand up, mate.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I've done a little bit of mentorship now with service leavers, and it does take a toll. You can feel it takes a toll on yourself sometimes when they're having a bad time, or they've been rejected from a job, or they're struggling writing their CV, or other things going wrong in their lives. It does take an emotional toll on you. So if you are looking to get into coaching or mentoring, like you just said, make sure you're prepared for the highs and lows of it because it can be quite tough. And obviously, yeah, if you are offering psychological advice, probably being qualified to a good position to start with. But I wanted to touch more on your the call center experience and how your time in that industry helped you become a scrum master. I imagine there's lots of people skills, and I refer back to my own time in the military, and these guys will vouch for that as well, where you have to move every 2 to 3 years, and you literally have to meet new people and get in with the team and meet and bond and all those things. So, how did that kind of those type of people skills help you with your job as a scrum master?
So the call center is a is a double-edged sword. I can see what you're getting at, and you're right. For getting out there, getting salesy, getting used to talking to people, being outgoing, being able to influence and motivate. Very, very good for that, and that's very helpful for someone, especially in the technology industry. The vast majority of people in there are not heavily extroverted; they tend to be more introverted. So having that type of sort of apprenticeship in a role where you need to be in the face up and at them is very helpful. But the other side of the call center, I always think back to, is it's a case study in how to create a really poor workplace culture. It's very much chew them up, spit them out. They're going to work every second of the day, and we're going to bleed them dry for everything we can get. And that was a really good initiation for me. And to be honest, I was lucky I got a call center job, because if I'd got something, this seems brain dead looking back, but I used to work at a social club, not far from where I live now. And if I could have got 40 hours a week doing that job, I would never have left. I loved it. I loved just being social. It's always a party. It's a good time. Getting the call center job that was worse was actually the best thing that could have happened to us, because I just started thinking, well, I can't do this forever. I'm not going to last here for 10, 15 years. Um, so yeah, double-edged sword. But I agree with you on the sales front that you're getting that. That's incredibly helpful, especially when you're in an industry where you're going to be surrounded by these more reserved, introverted, deep thinking folks, and you need to try and tease things out of them. Very, very helpful in that regard.
It's just that language of speaking, that art of communication, isn't it? Like slowing your pace down and knowing when to be high, low, and all those types of things that if you're in a sales scenario with someone on the phone, that's the only form of communication you've got is the voice. So utilizing that is a really powerful tool sometimes. But yeah, I hear what you say.
There's even elements of storytelling in there. Like I'm working on a talk at the minute that touches on cinema and agile and some parallels and sort of efficiencies between the two. And that storytelling approach, as you know, when you do a sale, you're identifying a need, you're creating a sense of FOMO and all that good stuff. And that's those sort of storytelling elements, features, I don't know what you'd call them, but those are incredibly helpful as well for taking not only your team on a journey, but when you need to play back to external stakeholders, so you've had a bad couple of sprints and a VP wants to know what's going on, you can really leverage those type of things to price into their thinking what it is you're actually doing and how you, in spite of challenge, you're still providing value.
Yeah, those types of cards are becoming quite popular. I mean, like storytelling tactics and things like that. I think called pip decks or something, I keep saying, but really strong in enabling you to tell a story to whether it is just reporting to stakeholders or delivering a meeting or whatever it is, just framing it slightly so people are actually engaged throughout the way, rather than just delivering bad
Scrum
news.
call in there somewhere. There's another Scrum qualification in there somewhere.
Oh, we'll see it soon, won't we, on scrum.org. Professional Scrum storytelling. Dave's setting it up. That's what he is.
Yeah, I've actually got shares, so I can't talk about that. No, but I've had that storytelling tactic webpage up for ages.
So, in your role, because again, a lot of people that are listening would have left the military. They've done their Prince 2 qualification. They've done a little bit of Agile, but they're majority of people that leave will be set on a project management direction. So, as a delivery manager, but also as an Agile delivery manager, what does your day-to-day look like? And John, let us know if this is any different to yours as well.
So this is very interesting. I've got a lot of hot takes in this, so I've got to be careful because what I don't want to do is taint the view of people who are new to the industry. But I've got a lot of hot takes that I think are probably right on this.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of the delivery manager role for me is sort of selfishly, industry have wanted a term that's just going to catch all, just so we can get people in who can deliver stuff for us. I think that's all businesses really want. They want people who can come in, steer deliveries and get things across the line. The project manager, agile delivery manager, scrum master, it's sort of immaterial to them. And you see that in the job adverts when you see a lot on LinkedIn, this isn't a real scrum master position. They're asking us to do a RACI chart. I'm a scrum master. It's like, well, do you want the job or not is the question. It's who do you think dictates who the role is? It's the employer. There's a power relationship here. You don't tell them what they're hiring for. But that's sort of the beauty of the delivery manager role. You're sort of, from what I've seen, and don't get me wrong, I haven't seen this at a foundation level, but at the senior level, you're sort of trusted to make the call on what the appropriate elements are to bring in, whether that is agile focused stuff or whether that's traditional project and program stuff. And I always say it's horses for courses. It's not that agile is inherently better or worse than any other approach. It's what environment does your project exist in? What are you trying to do? Who have you got at your disposal to get things done? And those sort of factors should dictate your approach. And again, it's one of those things you look back and you think, I can see why Agile and Scrum at the time did so well because it was such a counterculture to what existed before. But ultimately, it's taken a long time to integrate. Oh, there's a lot of stuff in project management and program management that's still pretty good. It might not be better. It might not be perfect in every situation, but there's still a lot there that you can lean on and pull in. And that, as I say, one of my hot takes is I think that's why we're seeing sort of not a rejection, but certainly a recalibration in the job market of project managers aren't going anywhere. They're going to be around forever. Like they've always been in higher demand.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's because it's what businesses want. A lot of businesses sort of lull themselves into a false sense of security. The project managers will get things done on time, on budget, within scope, all that good stuff. But ultimately, it's because there's a lot of good stuff in there that businesses have relied on for a long time, and it's worked for a long time. Agile's got stuff to add as well. So again, not to say project management is necessarily better, but the combination of these approaches is where you really should be. Your focus should be around picking the best from what's available, not sticking strictly to a framework approach or PMBOK body of knowledge or Scrum guide or Kanban guide. These should all just be tools in your arsenal. These should not be, I'm here to do Scrum to the letter by the book and no one can tell me otherwise.
Yeah. And sorry, John, I got your hand up for one. So I see that a lot with project management roles. The company want a project manager, but actually within the job description, they'll say agile experience required or understanding of Scrum, because even though they want a project manager, that's what they define it as in their HR structure. But actually, once you get into the role, you find out that, okay, we are delivering something in an iterative cycle, so we're going to put more of an agile spin on it rather than a waterfall. But like you say, the situation and the environment dictates what the delivery, what the methodology is or the approach is. So completely agree with that approach. And I'll let John go and I'll add something afterwards. Go on, John.
Oh yeah, just from my perspective, and I laugh on LinkedIn and I see all the debates and people asking about what course. It's not so binary, and like you said, you just take the best of everything. You know, I've done no Scrum Master qualification, but I'm doing the role of a Scrum Master. It's not difficult. You learn quickly. You take the best bits, you make it work. And with the place I'm in the automation center, so all our projects that come through, you know, they've already gone through the process of funding. So we're getting to it at the point of delivery. So I don't do any of the what's the word I'm looking for? Business case stuff. That's all done and dusted. You know, we've got the business architects, the triage process, we have benefits that work on that. So I work within, you know, business as usual, delivering the project. And again, it's just make sure it's not that so binary. And as I was saying, all the projects we get are duration. You're looking no longer than 6 months. All tactical fixes, nothing that really aligns to a strategic or massive policy. So it's all quick fixes to reduce, you know, antiquated processes out in the various departments, reduce hours of people working. So it's all quick fixes. But I think the biggest fear with our role is we're taking away jobs. So that's what people think. So there's a bit of a fear and apprehension when they come to us. They think, okay, my job takes 6 hours a week to do these reports. You're going to bring AI and machine learning. That's going to eliminate that in minutes. So there's a little bit of fear. And at the end of the day, we're trying to help them so they can be better employed elsewhere. But like you said, you know, steal what you can. There's so much out there and there's so much knowledge as well.
Just before you come back in, Jake, I used to work at DWP for a long time in an automation department, and we got exactly the same challenge. But like, one of my hot takes when it comes to automation is the jobs and tasks it's automating. Is that really what you want to do? Like the stuff I'm taking away, is that really what you think your value add is here? And I even see it as far as like checkout operators in Asda. It's like, is that really what you want to do with your life? Do you want to work on a till in Asda? Is it really a heartbreak that that's been automated away? Yeah, I find it strange. I mean, AI is probably going to be a new advent in terms of what can be taken away, especially creative pursuits. Totally understand that. But in old style RPA stuff, I always thought, why are you so against me taking away the busy work and the really toil based work that you've got to do here? Why is that such a problem?
Yeah, and on that as well, it's also sorry, Jake, it's also a culture shock. So you have the caseworkers from, let's say, Border Force, for example. They've been having their notepad and paper for years and years. Now we come in the automation center with the business change, the operational business change, saying, you just have to do this on this pad we're going to give you. No, stop. So it's really interesting that the projects are ongoing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the bit I was going to add was around how do you manage that end user bit if you are engaging with the end users? But I suppose it's more at a business level that they're requesting these automation changes, isn't it?
Is that me, Jake? Is it?
Well, both of you have got automation in public sector experience.
So from my AC perspective, we have our own business change embedded within the AC, and they're solely responsible for the product that's developed going into the immediate team within that department. So just say they introduce a new tech or a new process, our business change will help that immediate admin team with the business change. It'd be then up to the business to then distribute that training externally to the caseworkers, and just say someone has to submit an MS Forms. It'd be a case of how they disseminate that info of the changes. So we do immediate team, and then anything additional to that, it'll be the business we're working with. They'll have their own change, operational change to deal with that stuff.
Nice. Okay.
It's an interesting one. This is sort of one of my go-to examples for when I say everything doesn't need an agile heavy hammer put on it, because the area I was working in, we were automating existing processes. There wasn't much discovery that needed to happen. We knew what the process was. We just needed to get that out of manual hands and get that automated so the backlogs would come down. And that's where we're probably not in a complex environment there. We're in probably a complicated, maybe even a simple one, depending on the process. And when you're operating at that level, some of the Scrum and Agile processes become more of an overhead than a help at that point. If we know exactly what the job is, we know there's going to be no change to this process because it's wrapped up in compliance and policy, and ministers have got eyes on this. That sort of exploratory nature of Agile and the ongoing discovery is sort of immaterial at that point if it's so tightly wrapped in that compliance. And that's why there was a talk I listened to recently from Nigel Thurlow and Dave Snowden, who are sort of masterminds, and they sort of hit the nail on the head for me. They said we need more chefs and less recipes, and I thought that's absolutely right. We don't need to be selling recipes anymore. We need to trust the people at the coalface to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. There's 3 words you mentioned. I'm just going to touch on them if you can explain a bit. Complex, complicated, and simple.
Oh, I hope Dave Snowden.
Where did they come from, Dave?
So I hope Dave Snowden doesn't watch this because he's known for his vocabulary and being ultra precise. But basically, Dave Snowden is a bit of a mastermind, worked for IBM for a long time, and he's the father of what's called the Sinafin or the Kinafin framework, which is a method that you can use to understand the environment that your project or your initiative or your development is sitting in. There's traditionally 5. The simple is very straightforward. We do a task, we get a result, we know A to B how things work. Complicated is a little more opaque. It's not just as simple as A gets B. There are other constraining factors, but ultimately you can boil that down to an experienced hand and expert tutor can guide you through what needs to happen here. There's a lot of things to consider, but it's still quite formulaic in how we approach this. Complex is a step further forward than that. Complex environments, experience, the value of experience is reduced because the environment doesn't react the same way day to day. And this is where you might have heard of the phrase probe, sense, respond. In these complex environments, you're working at such a level of complexity now that you can't hope to understand the system as a whole. You need to do experiments on the system, see how it responds, and look for rich veins of value to chase down from there. Those are the 3 key ones. There's also a chaotic environment where things are changing so fast, and I'm sure ex-military guys have got a lot of experience of this. You just need forthright, bold action now. We assess very quickly and we do another one because we haven't got time to assess and make an impact. And there's also one in the middle that I've forgotten the name of for some reason, but it's sort of a transient state between the 4, if I remember correctly. As I say, I hope Dave Snowden doesn't watch this because there's slow explanation. But do your research on Kinafin and don't speak to, but have a look for Dave Snowden's profile on LinkedIn. He's a very sort of academic, high-level thinker on these type of things, and everything he comes out with it's quite conceptual and it feels quite, as I say, academic and advanced, but it is very actionable and useful in your day-to-day role.
Yeah, we'll make sure we link that in the comments, subsections, all that sort of stuff where it's where this is going to be posted. So very useful info.
Yeah.
Wayne, over to you, mate.
Dave, I've just finished. I'm just finishing Team of Teams now on the last few pages, which is like a fascinating book. And he talks about the complex and complicated, and he talks about how the advances in technology from aircraft, for example, even though it's been around for a fairly long time now, but going from planes that were fairly complicated to fly, you had to have a lot of experience, like you said, and then they went to kind of a point where there was lots of sensors involved and more. You couldn't just plan tasks out with the Taylorism, Frederick Taylor approach, so that they became complex. And that there's an example in the book about when a plane crashed, and it was literally just because a sensor hadn't locked in with the landing gear hadn't gone down, and they didn't crash and kill hundreds of people because the landing gear. It crashed because they ran out of fuel, because they kept on checking things and doing different things, because it was just a complex environment, and they tried to manage their way out of it, where in that environment they just couldn't. They had to react, and everyone had to have some shared consciousness of how they delivered the outcome of landing the plane safely and getting everyone off board alive. So it's a really interesting example. I highly recommend that book if anyone hasn't read it, or anyone's listening hasn't read it.
Which book was that, Wayne? Team of Teams?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
There's another parallel, and this is primarily from my programming background, but I assume you all know what Doom is, the video game.
Yeah.
So Doom was created by a company called id Software, and they had some of the most tremendous minds ever. And the best among them probably was a guy called John Carmack, who's sort of accepted as the best programmer ever. He's done, I mean, he created Doom, which just revolutionized video games and simulation stuff. He worked on Metaverse at Facebook. He's done all sorts of different stuff. There's a great podcast he did with a guy called Lex Freedom, and he talked about this as well, the advances in technology. We've gone from code bases that you could fit onto a floppy disk to code bases that you could never hope to read in your lifetime now. And he says exactly the same thing. There's a passage in the podcast where they're talking about documentation and effectively enabling developers to work on these massively distributed code bases. And there was an old trope before, and this probably you could have got away with this if this code base was small enough, but if you'd asked for help, a developer would typically say to you, "Well, read the code and you'll figure it out." And that's just an insane statement in this day and age. If you're working for a hyper-skilled organization like a Facebook, a Twitter, or a DWP, there is so much there. You cannot hope to read all that, understand it, and then program effectively on that. As I say, it's a case of you conduct experiments on the system, see what happens, and you adjust your approach from there. There's just no possible way, especially the scale that some organizations are working at now that they didn't work at even 10 years ago. You just can't possibly hope to have a solid mental model for how all this fits together anymore. So it's that environmental awareness piece, I think, is, for me, that should be part of PSM1 and CSM. This is sort of like fundamental grounding knowledge that should be there. But it's not even that it's not there, it's just it's not talked about. But there's, as you know, there's commercial reasons for that, unfortunately.
I think I've definitely become more aware of my limitations of my software background, working with software teams and empowering them to make decisions and lead on what they know. We've had recent examples in our team where we've got a middle management layer with an external software supplier, and there's a real gap in communication. Things are getting filtered down, and then it's not remove that middle management layer, let them enable the team and let them talk, and then they get what they need. Because otherwise you just end up with months and months in between.
What you just touched on essentially is the people that are doing the job, let them do the job. They're the ones that know the system. They're the ones that know it inside and out. No manager has, Dave has obviously mentioned around having that technical acumen, that technical experience, but management are making decisions that they don't know what they're on about. They understand the business level, but let the teams do what they need to do. Have you just remembered your question?
In my mind. Yeah, it was just around kind of, as you were saying, like about having project managers becoming delivery managers or scrum masters or agile project managers, whatever you want to call them. But I think we're maybe creating more generalists now, which is maybe reducing the amount of technical managers that we maybe should have, which doesn't enable that. So when you have more generalists, I'm asking those things that are not really achievable, like you just said about reading the entire code base or reading any part of a code base. It's just too big a question to be able to ask of somebody.
Yeah, it sort of it rings a bell for me around situational leadership, because now, especially when you're working on these hugely distributed products and services, you can have a senior developer who's worked on this for 10 years, but a grad comes in, works on a specific element of it for 6 months. They are probably now in the driving seat on this particular element because they've built up a deep knowledge of this area. Although the senior has a lot of wider sort of experience to pool on, if we're talking about deep specialist knowledge in this one area, just because they've had the time to focus and drill down on that, they're probably going to be in the driving seat there. And that's why it's important to have a team that you can lean on, that you can transfer that burden of leadership to from time to time, and you've got the right. In old management suite, we used to call this aces in places. If we need a decision in area A, Wayne makes the decision. If it's in area B, Jake makes the decision. And I don't think that's a bad mantra to come back to, having aces in places. If we need support, knowledge, whatever in this area, these are the people who are best equipped to make the decisions there. Because ultimately, as a delivery manager or project manager, you can feel the pressure to have all the answers. You need to be able to tell stories, don't get us wrong, because you need to get confidence in your customers, but you don't necessarily know absolutely everything. And you'll get to a level eventually in your career, as you keep moving up, you'll get to a level where it's just not possible anymore to know everything.
Yes, that thing you just mentioned around aces for spaces kind of takes it back to like military experiences where there's a rank structure. hierarchical structure. There's pros and cons, but actually all corporals are empowered to make those decisions that then affect the ranks below them. They don't have to make that call to push it up a level to get that decision made. Any corporal at any level or in any team can make a decision. So whoever's closest, any lance corporal, any private will look up and go, right, okay, you're a corporal, you make the decision then. It doesn't matter if you've been in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. There's that decision being made by that allocated individual who has a wealth of experience, leadership, all those other good things that come about, but they're empowered to make that decision because of seniority, almost time served and experience in that domain. Slight nuances, but again, that when you said that aces in places, that kind of made me sort of go back to that sort of military rank structure. Does that have I explained that, or Wayne, you're more sort of ingrained with that?
No, I get it. It's I say just because it's topical for me at the moment. That Team of Teams book, and when we're talking about empowering leaders at all levels, to make decisions. Like there was a use case where they had to go into General Stanley McChrystal and ask him if he could do a bombing run. He's like, most of the 99.9% of the time, he said yes, because they knew more information than him because they were at the coalface and they had all the information. He was just kind of signing it off all the time. That was reducing the time to a possible poor outcome where they couldn't do it, or the target had moved on, or they didn't have air support, or they didn't have troops on the ground to do certain things. So time, those 3-4 minutes, was critical in a complicated and very, very, actually most times complex and chaotic. So they kind of had to make those decisions, and he had to really push that down and change the culture within the special forces operating system that it was called. How it's called now, yeah.
So that's exactly the same internship around with
you've read my mind. You've read my mind.
It's just tell me what you intend to do, and it's I intend to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, go and do it. They get paid to make those decisions, so go and make them.
Apparently, Alex Ferguson did something similar. He would people would come to him with questions, especially after he retired, and he was doing a lot of business stuff, and they'd say, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, Z, what do you think? And his first response would always be, well, what do you think? And there's a famous golfer who said, well, I'm asking you. And he said, well, you've got an instinct, tell us what you think. And the mechanism was he would listen to what they said, whatever it was, it would get unconditional positive regard generally. He'd be like, yes, that's great, just think about bum, bum, bum. It's still their plan now, but he's lending them elements of his experience that they can then bolt onto that. Which I think is a really nice sort of training and development method. You're not offsetting their ideas. You're letting them benefit from some level of their experience, but you're also giving them just that little bit of guidance. And if you're parents, you'll know what I mean by this. But this is sort of a very similar way to how you'll talk to your kids as the development. You won't talk to them at their level. You won't talk to them at your level. You'll talk to them at what's called the zone of proximal development. And this is just far enough outside of their comfort zone that if they stretch, they can get it. And that's how you bring them on. And I think there's a lot of parallels between that and wider business training, especially in delivery and project management, where you need to be able to think about how to frame experiments on your own. You can lean on experience, fair enough, but it's not always going to immediately transfer. So you can just give them, okay, it seems like a good plan. If I was going to do that, I would think about bum, bum, bum. And that's good enough generally. And you still haven't hijacked their learning journey. You're still letting them get what they want while offering something additional, which I think is a beautiful mechanism.
There's different points, isn't there, of that kind of management where you have to kind of direct and mentor and coach and all those types of things, and it's pulling on all those experiences that you have going through your careers that you can then know how to do that. Like I've had experience recently where I've had a guy who I needed to coach to present something back to the room in a sprint review, and he's like shit scared, didn't want to do it, and I was like, let's sit down and break it down and give him a simple structure, which is very much micromanagement approach, but saying like follow this structure. And then when you deviate from the plan or someone asks you a question that's a bit left field, you can always just bring it back, and just gave him that structure, which really helped him. And then we can start having fun with it now when he comes back to me and says, oh, that didn't go quite to plan. And I can say, well, what do you think? And then he can kind of pull his own learning pathway out of that.
Yeah.
Go on, John.
Dave, I've got some questions that are almost orientated at me, probably 6, 7, 8 months ago, and will resonate with a lot of people listening to this.
Okay.
So just say an individual got a delivery manager role and had no technical background, like me, what advice would you give them?
It's probably not the first thing you should concentrate on. You want to get a grip on the delivery side first, but a lot of that will feel quite natural. I always say the nice thing about project and delivery training is it sort of just formalizes what you've already got an instinct for or what you already know. Whereas technical training is very different. This is like a whole new paradigm that you need to start and get your head around. The most accessible thing nowadays, I think, is probably either YouTube, because the world's your oyster on there. The problem I find with YouTube is you're overcome with options and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So I always recommend people go for foundational cloud level stuff because it's very structured, it's very rigid, and it covers a lot of the basics. Doesn't cover them all, but you don't need them all. In your role, you just need a foundational level of understanding of what's going on. And once you get to a point where you think, right, if I'm working with a team, I know they can't obscure things from me, pull the wool over my eyes, or hide things anymore. That's all you need. You don't need to go and become sort of an architect or a developer level person. You just need to know enough to understand that you've got confidence in what's going on. I hope that answers the question, because it sounds a little bit dismissive now. I play it back. I didn't mean to put it that way.
No. So for me, for example, I've got no tech background. I'm now in month 3 with an extension inbound as well. So I must be doing something right. I finally started to understand it, and that's just through listening and asking loads of questions. And I think what I've brought to party is a holistic approach to every problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from my experience, a lot of the developers, TAs, BAs, they're focused on their little silos at times, and it's just open them up and having that holistic approach. Going to be thought about this, we thought about, and they don't, because they're so focused on their tasks at the time. I know that's the whole agile ways of working, is to increase collaboration, but I still find that within our squads, there's still a bit of that's my role. It stops there. I hand over. So I think my experience is coming in, going, have we thought about that? Have we thought about these governance hoops, like the TDA, the BDA process, HOX, for example? There's lots of things they just don't think about, and you're there just to go, have we thought about this? The developer's saying, yeah, this is an easy design. I can get this nipped in 2 weeks. Hang on. The lightweight assurance document is going to take 4 weeks to get in. It's just they don't think bigger picture, second, third order effects, as we say in the military. So that's where I think I've been quite useful in absence of my tech knowledge in the first instance, which is slowly coming around. Painfully slow, but slowly getting there.
You've taken the right approach to spread yourself as far as you can, and to pull an old school project management idea that's sort of gone out of fashion now. You can think of a project manager, a delivery person, as the CEO of their initiative, which is fundamentally what you are. And the CEO's concerns are so much wider than the CFO's, who cares about the numbers, or the CTO's, who cares about the technology, or the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the chief people officer or the head of staff. The CEO's is so far reaching. And a little bit like we're talking on, you can't try and boil the ocean. You're going to get to a point, even in a single project, where it's not possible for you to know everything in detail. You need to have a bit of a feeling and a bit of an instinct for, okay, I've been in this situation before. This is what happened. This feels sort of similar, so this is what I need to do. And you'll sort of build up those instincts as time goes on, which is, for me, that's when you know you're improving, when you can't quite put your finger on what's bothering you, but you know there's something floating out there that's waiting to sting. And I think that's when you really know you're starting to get somewhere.
Yeah, you kind of know when things, I'm starting to realize when things are amiss or certain things are said. I'm like, you haven't really looked at the requirements. You haven't really looked at the business analyst requirements, because your design doesn't match it's just little things that you're picking up on. You're going, you should be all over that as the TA, for example, little things like that.
Yeah, but it'll be good for you to look back and think 3 months ago, I wouldn't have questioned that. I would have just took it. But now you've started to build up that muscle memory of, okay, there's something going on here, which is, as I sort of the first step on, you're improving now. You're on the path. You've taken steps now.
Yeah, and I think just like Jake said at the start, you've got to be resilient and just take those punches and just go.
Yeah, they always go to plan, man. They always go to plan. Don't worry about
it. That was one tough week. I'll regroup, come back Monday, and see what else is going to bring me. That's been my journey so far. So it's been tough, but the learning curve's been like that, but worthwhile.
Yeah. And John, I think you smashed it on the head there when you say build up that technical knowledge. You know, Dave's absolutely killed it. You follow him on LinkedIn or whatever, and you'll see every cloud certification has been completed, and he's absolutely smashed every aspect of it. But actually, when you first start out, the knowledge you need is the knowledge that the technical people hold. So you should forget about trying to upskill and be one of the developers. Just ask them. So yeah, one of my mantras now is I have no ego. You know, I'm overseeing what 40 plus innovation projects within defense and security that cover AI to satellites to all sorts of stuff. And I know nothing. I go into these things and I'm like, sorry, this is a kickoff meeting, but I do not have a Scooby of what you're actually trying to achieve from a tech. I know what you're trying to achieve, but technically how you're doing it, I don't. So I'm on a learning curve and on a journey with you on this. So my ego is completely removed, and then I'll just ask questions as we go in. I'm like, look, I'm asking this from a really stupid place. Please just humour me. What is it you're actually on about? What are you trying to achieve? Can you put it in layman's terms? Because I really don't understand it. And removing that ego allows them to open up because they really want to talk about their technical part. They enjoy it. They love it. They got a passion and they got so much knowledge that they want to share. And that's one big thing I found is just removing that ego and just being willing to ask those stupid questions. We always say there is no such thing as a stupid question. We'll leave that up for debate at a different point.
I'm sure I've asked a few.
Wayne, quickly, there's one quick topic I was going to go on because I know we've got 9 minutes left, 8 minutes now. But
A quick observation, mate, is just more like it's that fine balance in those type of kickoff meetings where you're not the customer, or you're not the user, so you don't want to be the person center focused, asking all the questions technically just for your benefit. It's that there is a fine balance on when you're in those types of meetings. But yeah,
absolutely.
Go on, over to you, Jake.
So there are a couple more questions I wanted to cover, but I think this one's a really important one. I think John's going to gain a lot from it, and future listeners will as well. So you've just recently started a mini series on agile metrics, which, contentious point for some, but a very interesting topic for some of these metrics and where they can and can't be used, or where they can be useful, where they can't be useful. So I'm not going to ask what your favorite is, because that's unfair. You can't have favorites. But which ones do you currently find valuable in your current setup, and which ones do you wish you could use? So 2 questions there.
So before I answer the question, just because if I don't say it, someone will pull us up on it. Again, this is dictated by the environment, the product, the team. This is not, there are some metrics I'll try and leverage in, but over time working on a project, you'll start to figure out, okay, this isn't serving me the way I thought it would. Let's bring something else in. So again, just like don't be married to the Scrum Guide or the PMBOK, don't be married to a particular set of metrics. Some will be good, some won't. And you flex and grow as you go. One I like to use a lot, and again, it's an old school project management one, but it's a good one, is earned value. And earned value management is all about just creating a view of how far you are, how far you thought you would be, and what the variance is. So what you would do is compare, for example, in an agile world, we'll have a budget for the project, we'll have a backlog of work, and we'll have a timeline. So let's say we are 25% of the timeline in, we've spent 80% of the budget, and we've done 10% of the work. We're in the shit. And we can distill that down to one number. However, if we're a quarter of the way and we've done half the work and we've spent half the budget, we're doing okay. And I think that's a really good one to not bring back from the dead, but that's a good one for agile people to have an awareness of, because execs love this one, because this gives them confidence that we've spent this much time, we're this much through the work, and we've spent this much of the budget, we're in good shape. And I think that's a really good sort of signpost to get under your belt. More agile focused ones and more modern ones, I think the DORA metrics are fantastic, especially if you're working in a product focused organization where you're talking about deployment frequency, recovery time objectives and all that good stuff. They are pretty good. And the final one that I posted about this recently, I got a bit of kickback for it, to be honest, and I was surprised, because Kanban flow metrics, the pro Kanban flavor, I think are brilliant. And those are cycle time, throughput, lead time, and work in progress, I think, if I'm remembering that right. But those 4 are really helpful. And those are typically the 4 that I'll start off with in any engagement, because if we're doing a long-lived product lifecycle or a fixed term, short and punchy project development, they'll have something to offer there. And work item age, I think, is the gold standard in terms of metrics, because that really concentrates minds around what's important. But yeah, there's just endless choices to pick from. And again, it's about you as a practitioner using your not taking from a document that was written 20 years ago, this is what we should do. It's about using your brain and using your intuition and your experience to figure out what is the path that I can use to drive this forward. It's really important to just not feel married to a framework, a set of metrics, an approach, anything like that. Just I always frame it as be a cowboy, take what works, discard what doesn't, and then move it as soon as it stops.
Because ultimately you're trying to deliver value and trying to get to an endpoint, aren't you? That is the thing with projects and products is a short-term piece of work to deliver value, and you've just got to get to that point and make sure you are delivering value, regardless of how you get there. No, that's really interesting. So I really like that earned value management. I've been hearing that a lot. I don't think it was one that I covered when I did my project management stuff, but it's definitely one that's creeping back in. Especially now that sort of delivery management role is becoming more of a hybrid catch-all situation, and there's a lot more finance focused on things. I'll put some links in the comments for that, but I'm definitely going to go away and do a bit more digging on that. Wayne, what's your metrics of choice at the moment? Team morale.
But yeah, I say that's what I say. Thankfully, I went on to Dave's mini podcast, and that morale was my number one for me. It's a really good one. It's a very good forward-looking metric. I quite like the idea of that earned value metric as well. I can imagine it's one of those ones. It doesn't necessarily say that the work that you've completed is valuable, does it? In that sense, so it could be it's how you use it, isn't it? With any metric, but I think for me, morale is a really good forward-looking metric, and one I'm very focused on with my teams at the moment. I did my Kanban method course and came off and started trying to apply cycle time and lead time to my guys, and they were an SRE team, site reliability engineers. It didn't really work, and I was like, okay, so I had to swallow my own pill there and go back to those DORA metrics where I kind of being able to get how long does it take to get a release from development to the user, and then how quickly does it take to fix it if it goes wrong, or find a problem and fix it as well. Have you heard of the SoCal guy before? Out with his name now, Dave. On any of his podcasts or like video chats. But his was asking a question like, how trivial is it to do a release in your company? Painful to trivial. It's a really good metric to understand from a software perspective. If it's painful, then we need to that's a good starting point. Why is it a good inwards looking metric to ask lots of questions then? So I like that one as well. How painful is it to do a release of software? Or how painful is it to do anything? How painful is it to deliver a vehicle from faulty back to the customer? How difficult is it to get someone off the biff back to being fully fit, working as a soldier?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm imagining people like Michael Lloyd and Chris Stone would call us a coward for this. But a good question I like to ask when I join a new organisation or a team is, what would it take to get you to deploy on a Friday? Personally, I never would. But it's a good sort of yardstick to figure out, right, how confident are you in your release pipelines? How confident are you in your automated tests? How confident are you in the robustness of your system? As I say, I'm very... I wouldn't say I'm against deploying on Fridays, but I just think the juice isn't worth the squeeze for me. Generally, it's not. But I can see where the likes of Chris and Michael are coming from in terms of you shouldn't be afraid of that. It shouldn't be a problem. I agree. And a lot of people pull back to like the Netflix model. And the thing I always say is, fair enough, Netflix can do it. They've got the budget and they're picking the best of the best. The organisations I'm working for aren't necessarily going to have that. So we need to work with what we've got. It's not bad to have as an aspirational goal, but to insist that we get there, I think, is a little bit foolhardy. Discretion's the better part of valor in a lot of ways.
Yeah. As a vehicle mechanic, we used to always get tank power packs turn up on a Friday afternoon to fit in, so we could deploy them pretty quickly.
But yeah, then you can go home for the weekend and not have to worry about anything. Because if it broke down, you just send the recce mech down. It wouldn't be your job, would it? Yeah. But the devs, they're at home at the weekend and they get a phone call saying that the systems have gone down. It's not going to be fun for them, is it?
Beers in on a Monday morning.
Wayne answers back, well, it's not me that's broken down.
Exactly. Okay, so we're just coming to the end now. I've still got quite a few questions that I wanted to ask, but I think maybe we can do a follow up at some point. It's always the way with these. I have 7 or 8 questions, and then we kind of go off piste. But that's what I love about these conversations. So you're currently in a consultancy. Your personal brand is awesome on LinkedIn. You're constantly engaged with Miro. You're doing all the stuff with the continuous learning. There's just so much stuff that's happening. But what is next on the cards for Dave Westgarth?
That's something I've been trying to figure out, to be perfectly honest. Because I don't think I want to go to like exec VP route. Equally, I don't want to be sort of a one-man band. So I'm sort of thinking deeply about what it is I wanted to do. That was mainly one of the drivers for me revivifying my technical skill set, because it atrophied for quite a while, because it's like learning a language. If you don't use it every day, it goes away. There is a few ideas that I've got, and I'd love to. In the cloud industry, they're great for giving away sort of free training and learning content. I would love to find a way, and this is one of my hot takes on Scrum. I don't think PSM 1 and CSM level stuff is stuff that people should have to pay for, because it's so foundational, it's not truly actionable, and it doesn't level anyone up apart from a really, really entry level initiate, and they've got plenty of other stuff that they can gain value for anyway. That's something that I want to do, just make that freely available for people, whether I create sort of a standalone certification or badge or something like that that'll do that and give people that for nothing. That would be a great thing to do. But wider career stuff, it's still unclear. I'm not quite sure where I want to go. I've thought about a lot of different things, to be honest with you. It's a good question, because I really don't know. I even thought about building my own sort of software as a service thing and seeing if I could make a fist of that. And every couple of months I get the urge to go back on and think, right, what problems could I solve, especially with AI powered stuff now? I think there's a lot of opportunities, but yeah, it's a good question, and one I haven't got a good answer for, I'm afraid.
But isn't that the joy of where you are in sort of the agile delivery space, is that especially the technical skills, you could pivot into a multitude of different routes. You're not just set in one box. Because of the background, because of the transferable skills, because of the technical acumen, you can go in whichever path you really want to go to, and all those skills that you built up will follow and translate really nicely. So yeah, effectively watch this space and see what AI powered PSM 1 course gets popped out in the next 6 months. Then
yeah,
maybe Scrum in AI. Maybe that'd be a nice little badge to have.
We can always employ Dave into the Agile O group quite nicely. If you got any free time, Dave.
He'll be amazing on the skills sessions, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
We'll chat about that offline.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Okay. We'll close it there, because I think we just hit the hour mark. Really appreciate your time, Dave. There's so much more that we could talk about. John, as a lone attendee on this live call, I hope you've gained some value from that as well. Make sure you connect with Dave and keep an eye on some of his posts and all his metrics and the things that are coming. We'll close it there for the call. We can catch up at any other time. But yeah, like I said, I really appreciate your time, Dave, for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and all that sort of stuff with the military community. There's a lot that they need to learn, and I think listening to the likes of you and all the other guests that we do have on a monthly basis, they're going to get more of a real world view of what is actually out there, and that is the whole purpose, is making that transparent, making it more accessible, because they know exactly what it is, rather than just trying to solve a dream. They get to know the real hard hitting facts of what day-to-day life is like. So yeah, really appreciate that. Yeah, I was going to say look forward to, but I'm trying to think of who the next guest is. Yes, the next guest is going to be Jack Hughes. So yeah, listen up for that one. He's ex-Royal Navy, made up in Carlisle, but he was made in the Royal Navy. There'll be a punchline added around that somewhere, I'm sure.
Some money.
Yeah. So yeah, he's going to be next guest with us. So that'll be really exciting to hear his views, how he set up the Everyday Agile as well. and then we'll have the virtual coffee chat coming up soon. So yeah, keep in touch. Let us know how things are. And Dave, again, thanks so much for your time, buddy.
Great, so thanks. Pleasure to talk to you guys.
Cheers, Dave.
Cheers
Thank
all.
you. Bye. Thank you.